The Pacers and the Timberwolves have made the same mistakes. Not only have the Pacers and the Timberwolves had opportunities to win these games, like they haven't been blowouts, but they also have had leads in these games. So let's talk about the mistake that they're both making, because they're making the same one, which is kind of crazy, but also kind of not when you think about the inexperience on both teams. Yes, Mike Conley has a ton of experience in the playoffs. So does Rudy Gobert. And also from the Pacers standpoint, Pascal Siakam is a champion. But other than those three main players, Anthony Edwards, this is his second time, I guess, in the playoffs, but his first time making a deep run. Jaden McDaniels, same thing. Naz Reid, Tyrese Halliburton, his first time in the playoffs. Andrew Nembhard. So, majority of the team is inexperienced. I kind of alluded to it in the previous clip talking about their inexperience. But the inexperience has led to the late game turnovers. What both of these teams have is talent, of course. And for the Minnesota Timberwolves, one of the best defensive teams in the league. And for the Pacers, one of the best offensive teams in the league. Opposite sides of the spectrum. If you've been watching these games, for example, we'll talk about the Minnesota versus Dallas game last night. And we know at the end of the game, okay, we'll talk about how Minnesota had a lead as well. But in crunch time, Anthony Edwards had the ball and he threw it away. And then we also have game one where Jaden McDaniels drove to the basket and kind of got stuck in the air and threw it away. That was towards the end of the game as well. I forgot how much time was left on the clock. But both of these plays were monumental for the Timberwolves losing these games. And then we'll go to the Pacers side. We know, I talked about this in the video where I talked about Celtics versus Pacers, the game one. And I talked about how one of the biggest plays to me was when they threw the inbounds ball to Pascal Siakam and he didn't catch it, or he touched it rather and went out of bounds. And so then it became Celtics ball, and that led to the Jaylen Brown game tying three, went to overtime, Celtics win. And while that is also a turnover, a little bit different than the Minnesota one, you never throw the ball towards the opponent's basket. And that's just an inexperienced mistake. And then similarly tonight, the Pacers, although there's going to be a debate on did Drew Holiday foul Andrew Nembhard? Andrew Nembhard didn't just lose the ball. So we can debate all day whether or not that was a foul, and I'm not going to get into that. But at the end of the day, it was still a late game turnover. So again, it could have been a foul. I'm not arguing that it wasn't a foul, but I'm just saying a late game turnover again, and they had a lot of late game turnovers. Even before that, they were turning the ball over a lot. And so Minnesota and the Pacers, I always sometimes I say their first name, I guess Minnesota's their first name. Sometimes I say the team name. I don't know why, but anyway, the Timberwolves and the Pacers both had ample opportunities to win these games, and they are just not executing down the stretch. Think about it. The Pacers had an 18-point lead in this game. In the Minnesota game, they had a 20-point lead. They had a double-digit lead for sure. Maybe it was 16, whatever it was. But both of these teams have put together, offensive possessions and defensive stops and stuff like that. But when it comes to the execution at the end of the game or to end quarters, they just aren't doing it. And I'm not saying this to criticize them. What I'm pointing out is you can see similar qualities because they both have similar experience in the playoffs. And that lends to the whole thing that experience matters in the playoffs. And sometimes you have to lose in order to win because you have to learn how to get a stop at a certain time, when to slow down the pace, all these kind of things. That Luka, for example, knew exactly what to do. Kyrie knew exactly what to do. And so it's a learning experience. Because again, I think Minnesota, based on, their defense, their offense, their talent, all that stuff, they could beat Dallas. And they've shown that they can stay in the game, have leads and stuff like that. And then for the Pacers, I don't think a lot of people would pick the Pacers to win. But again, they could easily be up 2-1 in this series. And then we are talking about a whole different ball game. So, and with Tyrese Halliburton out, obviously that really hurts their chances to win the series. But let's just say they were up 2-1. I mean, at least it makes it an interesting series. So my whole point to this video is, experience matters in the playoffs, and we are seeing it on full display in these conference finals in the East and the West. Like, the same thing is taking place for both teams. It's kind of insane. And this is why we see it every year. For example, the Warriors versus the Kings last year. It was the Kings' first time in the playoffs, in however many years it was. And it was a lot of those players' first time. And although the Kings put up a really good fight and it went to Game 7, Steph Curry and the team knew exactly what to do, especially Steph Curry. He took over 50 points in Game 7. But he knew exactly how to control the game, and he wasn't going to let them lose. And it was like, it didn't matter what the Kings did. They just didn't know how to stop it, if that makes sense. And we see this throughout NBA history. A young team, is hungry in the playoffs, and they're very talented, and they're very good, well coached, whatever team it is. But when it comes to playoff execution, it's just different than the regular season. And if you've never been there before, it's hard to just win the first time. Like, not everybody can win the first time. Like, I'm pretty sure Tim Duncan, correct me if I'm wrong, the first time he went to the playoffs, he won the championship, correct? Because they won in 1999 with Tim Duncan and David Robinson, and we know that David Robinson was hurt, I believe, the year that they got the #1 pick to get Tim Duncan. So, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was really early on, at least, in his playing career, that Tim Duncan won a championship. Now I gotta look it up. When did he get drafted? Okay, so he was drafted in 97, and like I said, they won in 99 with their twin towers, as they called them, David Robinson and Tim Duncan. And I didn't look up to see if they made the playoffs the year before, or like the year that Tim Duncan was a rookie. But regardless, it's very rare that you win that early on as one of the star players, you know what I mean? So you can't compare it to Tim Duncan. This is a good learning experience for the Timberwolves and Anthony Edwards and Tyrese Halliburton, although, again, he's hurt right now, but still. The Pacers, Andrew Nembhard, Aaron Nesmith, all these players, they are getting the experience that they need in order to win a championship later down the line, because both of them are talented. There's no debate about that.